Now, imagine if the real reason people struggle with weight is not lack of willpower. It's not about calories. It's not about exercise. What if it's about two little ingredients that are hiding in plain sight in almost every single thing you eat? What if I told you that flour and sugar, no matter how healthy they're marketed, break down into the same simple molecules that drive fat storage, hunger, and metabolic dysfunction? Today, we're going to unpack why these foods are not just empty calories, but powerful biochemical signals that push your body towards obesity, and why removing them may be the simplest, most effective step most people can take to regain their health. This is so important because I don't think people really realize this. Okay. First, what causes someone to gain fat? And there's only one hormone that causes someone to gain fat. You have to have this hormone, and that hormone is insulin. When your insulin levels are high, you actually force your body to store fat. You force your body to turn all the excess glucose that you eat. And as we go through this, you'll see that almost every single bit of glucose you eat is excess glucose. And it turns all that in triglycerides, and then it forces you to store that fat. When you allow your insulin levels to come low, that forces you to burn the fat out of your fat cells and use that for your energy, as well as all the other things that fat and cholesterol are used for in your body, which is a ton of things. So the whole key is keep your insulin levels low. So what makes your insulin go high? The only thing that makes your insulin go high is glucose in the blood. That's it. If you can keep glucose out of your blood, then your insulin levels will stay low. So where does glucose come from? That's the big question. Where does this come from? The only two places that glucose comes from is from storage sites within your body, because we have different ways to store glucose. It's called glycogen. So where we store that in our body, we have about 10% of our liver is all there is for glycogen, which is the like little glucose bricks. So glucose bricks, these little glucose molecules get stored as glycogen. And then when your body needs quick, fast, the fight or flight energy, it breaks that glycogen down, and that puts glucose into your blood. But you don't have very much glucose stores. In your liver, you have 400 calories in your liver as storage. And that's not very much. And then each of your skeletal muscles, each one has its own glycogen stores, but it's only good for that one skeletal muscle. And that's about 1% of each skeletal muscle. And that's right there in your skeletal muscle, because that's where, when you have fight or flight, when you have the stress situation, like a child getting ready to run out in the car, you need that energy source there immediately. And that's why it's there. But again, there's not very much. If you take all the glycogen out of your liver and all the glycogen out of all your skeletal muscles, it only comes to about 2,400 calories. That's enough energy to sleep for 24 hours without doing any other kind of activity. So that lets you know glucose is not supposed to be our main energy source. But the food companies and the drug companies have been teaching us for the last 50 years that is what we're supposed to use, is glucose. That's our main energy source that our body wants. It's a lie. They only say that because they want you continuously buy their products. Why? Because all their products contain glucose. And when you keep buying the products that contain glucose, you keep eating glucose. Now you start getting fat, and you start having all kinds of metabolic diseases. And that's where the drug company's in, and they can come in and focus on how to get that glucose down. So the food companies want you to get the glucose up. The drug companies want you to get the glucose down, and all of it can be totally stopped if you just stop eating it. Because the second way you get glucose into the blood, the only other way, is because you eat it. So the simple thing, don't worry about how to get the glucose down. Worry about not putting it up in the first place. If you can quit eating glucose, just try it. Try not eating glucose for 4 weeks. And I guarantee your blood sugar will be so low, you could get off all your diabetic medications. You will feel more clear-headed. You'll have more energy. You'll lose weight. Everything circles around this one thing: keeping glucose out of your mouth. But that's not the only one. Now, the reason I say this, we have become our body. Yes, every single cell in our body knows how to use glucose for energy. That doesn't mean it wants to, but we do know how to handle glucose. But we are glucose toxic. Like I said, the only glucose stores we have is a little bit, 10% of our liver, about 400 calories, and then 1% of each skeletal muscle, about 2,000 calories. That's it. Now compare that to 1 pound of fat that has 4,000 calories. So all the glucose stores in your body comes to 2,400. 1 pound of extra fat has 4,000. So if you're 10 pounds overweight, you've got 40,000 extra calories on your body that you can use for energy. And that's what you're supposed to be using for energy. But we've been psyched into using glucose for our energy. Therefore, all that stored fat just continues to get stored and gets even bigger and bigger. Now, to prove that we are glucose toxic, back in 1965, it was estimated that we only ate 2 teaspoons of sugar per person per day. Only 2. Take that. That's in 1965. In 2015, that's gone up to where we eat over 65 teaspoons of sugar per person per day. That is a ton of sugar, and our body is trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do with all this? And you may think that you're not eating that much. It's, oh, there's no way I'm eating that much sugar a day. But when you think that one 12-ounce can of soda pop has 10 teaspoons of sugar, and all the soda pop, fruit juices, the energy drinks, all the breads, pastas, carbs, cookies, crackers, everything that we eat, fast food, everything that we eat all through the day is just loaded with glucose, and that's on purpose. And it's actually not just glucose, it's glucose and fructose. And I'll talk about that in just a second. So we went from 2 teaspoons of sugar per person per day, and our bodies handled that with no problem whatsoever. Now that we've gone up to 65, and that was 10 years ago, I guarantee we're eating more than that now. We are bombarding our bodies with glucose. So all our bodies can do with the glucose is turn that all into triglycerides. So if you have a high triglyceride level, it's because you're eating way too much glucose. It turns it into triglycerides, and insulin is the one that forces that also. When you eat glucose, your insulin levels go high. Then your insulin levels tell your liver to turn all that into triglycerides and store that as fat. Then insulin goes to the side of this fat cell and tells your body to store all that fat inside the fat cell. You cannot burn it for energy. When your insulin levels are high, you cannot burn it. So this is what happens. This is the path. This is what happens. You eat glucose, your blood glucose goes up. When your blood glucose goes up, that causes your insulin levels to go up. Once your insulin levels go up, it does what I just said. It goes to the liver, tells your liver to turn all the excess glucose into fat, and it goes to the fat cell and tells your fat cell to store all this inside of fat. So let's get into what exactly is going on here. So the whole thing is sugar and flour. Glucose is when you talk about blood sugar. Okay, blood sugar isn't really sugar. Blood sugar is glucose. That's why you have glucose monitors. That's why you go and you have your glucose tested. When they say blood sugar, they only mean blood glucose. So if you're having a high blood sugar, which means you have a high blood glucose, it's because you're eating too much glucose. Now, sugar, a tablespoon of sugar, a teaspoon of sugar that's in your kitchen, that is actually called sucrose. Sucrose is a combination of glucose and fructose in 50-50. So blood sugar is only glucose. Sugar that you eat is glucose and fructose 50-50. Now, the key with this is glucose and fructose individually cause obesity. They directly cause you to gain fat and to store fat. Okay. So glucose, we've already talked about, every time you eat glucose, your body turns that into triglycerides and it stores it. Glucose is not sweet. If you think of flour, you think of eating a teaspoon of flour. Flour is just powdered glucose. So right there, flour is powdered glucose. So sugar is glucose and fructose. Flour is just glucose. So that's why if you just stop eating glucose and you just stop eating flour, or if you stop eating sugar and you stop eating flour, then that's why you're going to keep your glucose levels down, keep your insulin levels down, and then you're going to start burning your own fat out of your fat cells. It's that simple. It really is. So now to think of it, glucose and fructose together 50-50. Okay, that's what table sugar is. That's called sucrose. Think of glucose when you have cattle and you're going to send those cattle in to be slaughtered. What do they do first? They usually send them over to a place, a feedlot, and they sit there and they feed them a bunch of grains. Why? Because grains are just nothing but glucose. You grind them down, you get rid of all the fiber and all the phytonutrients and some phytotoxins, and you're left with just powdered. That's flour. That's glucose. And that's what they feed to these cattle so they can fatten them up in a very short time period. And then when they go to slaughter, you've got a bigger cow. So glucose is doing the same thing with you. When you're eating grains, when you're eating anything that comes from a plant, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit, you are getting glucose. Fructose by itself, fructose is what is sweet. Okay, fructose, when you're eating table sugar, that sweet taste, that's the fructose portion. Okay, fructose is also the sugar that you see in fruits. So fructose, just by itself, just like I said, every single cell in your body knows how to handle glucose. Every single cell in your body. However, fructose, it doesn't. So anytime you eat fructose, it goes straight to your liver and immediately it gets turned into a few things. It can be turned into glucose if you need it, but most people do not need more glucose because we're eating it constantly. We're inundated with it. The other thing, it actually goes into making inflammatory mediators. Fructose actually puts more inflammation into your body. The third one that fructose gets turned into is uric acid. And uric acid, if you are suffering from gout, is because you're eating too much fructose. So that means sugar, and that means high fructose corn syrup. And fruits. If you're eating a lot of fruits, you're getting a lot of fructose. That makes uric acid. Not only does that cause gout, but when your uric acid levels are up, it also causes high blood pressure because your body, your arteries in your body, in your blood actually secrete nitric oxide, which cause your blood vessels to dilate. Just like if you know somebody's had a heart attack and they're on nitroglycerin or something like that. Nitro causes the blood vessels to dilate. When you eat fructose and you increase your uric acid, it blocks nitric oxide, so that keeps your blood vessels constricted down, which increases your pressure. So those are some of the ways that fructose gets metabolized. But by far, the major way that fructose gets metabolized is to get turned straight into triglycerides. When your liver has all these triglycerides, it has to get it out of the liver and stored. And that's what it does. It stores it in your fat cells. And since you usually eat fructose along with glucose, now your glucose, that causes your insulin levels to rise. So all that triglycerides that your body's turned that fructose into is also getting stuffed in your fat cells. So that's a double whammy when you eat sugar. Now, because fructose is what's sweet, and fructose, that sweet taste, is what gets you addicted to eating man-made laboratory food, everything that's in a box, bottle, bag, and can with this huge ingredient list of all the chemicals. That's why they put fructose in everything, because they know it's sweet. They know you're addicted. Every time you eat it, you get that little dopamine surge in your brain, and the nucleus accumbens, your pleasure center of the brain. And so you want to eat more. That's why they put sugar and high fructose corn syrup in almost everything out there in packages. If you ever look at Turner Bot package around on the store, you're going to find one of four things. I guarantee, and usually you're going to find all four. You're going to find some sort of flour, which is going to be your glucose, some sort of sugar or high fructose corn syrup. That's going to give you more glucose, and it's going to give you fructose. Or you're going to find chemicals or seed oil, some kind of vegetable or seed oil. All of those ingredients are absolutely toxic to our bodies. That's why we're seeing all the devastation that we're seeing now with everybody's diseases. So this is on purpose. They're putting fructose in the food to get you addicted to it. But all you have to do is stop eating ultra processed food. Stop getting your food from the grocery store with all this box, bottle, bag, and can that is absolutely killing you. And if you think it's a money thing, you've got to add in how much you're spending on medications and doctor's bills and hospitalizations, because the people who stay away from eating that food also stays out of the medical system. And that's what I'm really trying to get everybody to do. So just to say something that I've said in the past, when you eat food, okay, when you're sitting there and you're eating food, your body, all the cells in your body, they do not see what you're actually putting in your mouth. Anything that's on your plate, anything's in your hands, anything goes in your mouth, your body doesn't see it. The only thing that does is the little path, your GI tract, gastrointestinal tract, from your mouth all the way to your anus. That the whole function of that tube from your mouth to your anus is to break every single food that you put in your mouth, break it down to the basic little building blocks that all of those are made out of. Then that can get absorbed into the blood and circulated around the blood. So anytime you put something in your mouth, it breaks it down to 5 things, just these 5 things. It breaks it down into either amino acids, that comes from protein. Protein, when you break it down, the basic building block is amino acids. Fat, whenever you bring fat down, you break that down into fatty acids. That's the basic building block. So there's amino acids and fatty acids. Anytime you eat a carbohydrate, it breaks it down to its basic building block, which is glucose. So every single time you eat a carbohydrate, you're putting glucose into your blood, you're making your blood glucose go high, and you're making your body secrete insulin, which does what we just said. It turns glucose into triglycerides, and it also stores it as fat. So that's where the glucose is coming from. That's the glucose that everybody's eating constantly in all the food. So carbohydrates, remember I said carbohydrates get broken down to glucose. Carbohydrates, first, we already talked about the high fructose corn syrup and the sugar. Okay, that's glucose and fructose. All plant-based foods, fruits and vegetables, everything that comes from a plant has carbohydrates, has glucose in it. And remember, carbohydrate and glucose are basically just 2 different names for the exact same thing. If you know there's a product that has 50 grams of glucose or of carbohydrates in it, then it has 50 grams of glucose also. So you don't even have to look at the sugar, the amount of added sugar on the back of the package. You know that's going to be there. Just look at the grams of carbohydrates. That's it. Look at the gram of carbohydrates. If you divide that number by 4, that's basically telling you, just to put it in a picture form, that basically tells you how many teaspoons of sugar are in that. So if you have 40 grams of carbohydrates and there's 4 grams of carbohydrate a teaspoon, 40 divided by 4 means you're eating 10 teaspoons of sugar in that. Now, yes, I know it's not the same. We just talked about that. Sugar is glucose and fructose together, to where blood glucose is just glucose, or blood sugar is. But it comes down to about the same thing. It gives you a good picture to know how much it is. So the food companies, drug companies are having you only look at the amount of added sugar, and that's not what you need to look at. You've got to look at the total carbohydrates, because that's all glucose, and that's what's causing the problems we have. So now that breaks it down into vegetables and into fruit. Remember, where our bodies, we have fat stores all over our body in our subcutaneous fat cells. We have fat stored. That's on purpose. That's the way God made us. He wants us to use that fat for our energy source. Okay. Plants don't use fat for their energy source. That's why you don't get fat and cholesterol when you eat plants. I'm sorry. That's where I was going earlier. The 5 things your body breaks food down into. It breaks it down into amino acids, fatty acids, glucose, vitamins, and minerals. That's all. That's all we need to have. That's all we have. And of all those, carbohydrates, glucose, that's the one we do not need at all. So vegetables use that glucose for their energy source. So think of what their energy source down below the ground, with the roots of the tree, that's where of the plant, that's where it gets its nutrients. When you eat vegetables from below the ground that are starchy, starch is the energy form for the plant, and starch are just long chains of glucose. So anything with starch are long chains of glucose. Anything with flour, powdered glucose. So that's why if you're having glucose issues, you need to, when you eat vegetables, you need to keep away from the vegetables that grow below the ground, the starchy vegetables. That's why they say eat your leafy greens. The ones that grow above the ground, they still have glucose in them, but various amounts. Some have quite a bit, some don't have very much at all. So you have to find out what you tend to eat and find out how much glucose is in it, because glucose is in every single vegetable out there. Fruit is the same way. Now remember, fruit, since it's a vegetable, since it's a plant, not since it's a vegetable, but since it's a plant, it has glucose in it. But also, because it's fruit, it also has fructose, because fructose makes it sweet. The reason why God did this is because he wants that fructose, he wants that sweet taste, so animals will eat it. There's only 3 foods that is actually made to be eaten. Bees are made to be eaten for the hive. All the bees eat on the honey that are in the hive. So honey is made to be eaten. Milk is the other one that's made to be eaten. Milk is produced for the infants of all mammals so the child can grow. The infant can grow into an adult. So milk is made to be eaten. The only other one is fruit. And the reason why, and a good way to think about this is think about a banana. When a banana is green, when it's not ripe yet and you eat it, it's very bitter. It doesn't have a sweet taste. But as that banana ripens, the reason it's bitter is because those seeds are not ready to germinate yet. They're not ready to be planted. Once that banana starts ripening, now the seeds are fertile. They're ready to go and be planted. So now it turns into sweet. So an animal will be attracted to eat it. It eats the fruit, and then it goes and it poops and all over the ground, and that lets the seeds down, and that causes seeds to grow. And that's how the fruits continue to grow and to spread. So fruits, honey, and milk are the only 3 foods that are actually intended to be eaten. Fruits are only supposed to be eaten at a certain time. Now, again, when you eat fruit, okay, so we just talked about it, it's made of glucose and it's also made of fructose. So what else have we just talked about that's made of both glucose and fructose? Sugar, high fructose corn syrup, and table sugar. Those are a combination of glucose and fructose. So people think that, oh, I'm going to quit eating flour and sugar, but I'm going to gorge on all this fruit. If you are gorging on fruit, you are still getting sugar. It's the same thing. You may be getting a few vitamins and minerals and a little bit of fiber. That means nothing. If you eat mainly animal-based foods, you don't need fiber. Fiber isn't needed in everybody. Fiber is only needed in the people who eat mainly plants. And they eat mainly plants because that's what we've been lied to for our whole life. For the last 50 years, we need all plant food. We need all this glucose, when in reality, we don't need any. Our body can make all the glucose it needs out of glycogen. It can make all the glucose it needs out of protein. It can make all the glucose it needs out of fat. Our body can make all the glucose it needs out of the stuff that we have. We never, ever have to put glucose in our mouth. So that's the difference. So please, if you think you're cutting out on sugar, but you're starting to eat more fruit, you're doing yourself a disservice. That's like shooting yourself in the foot. That's not how it works. You really need to decrease fruit too. And one way to know it is it's called eating seasonally. Only eat the fruits when they're actually being grown. And the easiest way to know that is to buy from a local farmer. That's going to be your safest way to eat fruits. And again, you don't need them. So if you do it, just eat tiny amounts. Now, we've already said there's different types of sugar. Blood sugar is glucose, and table sugar is glucose and fructose. And we already said that blood sugar, since it's glucose, that's flour and that's starch. So anything with flour, anything with starch, anything with sugar, anything with high fructose corn syrup, you are getting the 2 ingredients, glucose and fructose, that cause obesity. And also back on fructose, think of how bears hibernate. When bears hibernate, when they're getting ready to go hibernate, they go around and they forage all the berries that are in the area because all these berries have fructose in it. When they eat all these berries, all that fructose gets turned into fat. Now that bear has plenty of fat to go and sleep for a whole winter while it just lives off its own fat. So that's waste. So think of the cows going to slaughter for glucose and bears going to hibernate for fructose. Both of those are causing obesity. So just real quick here, we do have a course that's called the Pantry Purge Party. And what we're trying to do is help you get all these toxins out of your pantry. So if you want our help, what we have, you can go to our website, drstevehewlett.com, click on the Pantry Purge Party. And on Saturdays, it's just a 2-hour live course. It's live on Zoom. And everybody on the course, we will clean out our pantries together. We'll go through the ingredients, explain why you're wanting to get rid of them or what you ever want to do with them, but we'll be able to show you what toxins are in your pantry. And then it's up to you what you want to do with those. The worst thing you can do when you're trying to lose weight is keep all those toxins up in your cabinets, because as you start to lose weight, if you're not doing it right, you're going to be hungry a lot. If you do it the right way, you really won't be that hungry, but you will have times of hunger. And the first place you're going to go is to your pantry. You're going to look what's in there. So the best way to keep you on track is get that stuff out of the pantry so you're not tempted to eat it. So again, go to drstevehewlett.com, click on Pantry Purge Party, and help us purge your pantry together. Now, when you stop eating flour and sugar, okay, when you stop eating that, so that means you have no chemical-based foods and you leave carbohydrates, okay, get rid of all the man-made food, all the stuff in box, bottle, bag, and cans. Stop that immediately and look at the ingredient list. I guarantee you're going to see either about sugar, high fructose corn syrup, something that ends in O. So they've got so many different names for sugar on the back of these labeling because they know people are looking for it. So they hide all these different names. I think there's almost over 100 different names for sugar that they put in these things. So you don't know there's sugar. So again, it doesn't matter. Just look at the total amount of carbohydrates. Divide that by 4, and that'll tell you how many teaspoons of sugar that's in that. Okay. You don't even have to look at the sugar. Just look at the carbohydrate content. And again, fruits and vegetables, they all contain sugar, glucose, in some form. Fruits, they all contain both glucose and fructose. So if you are struggling with losing weight, if you're a type 2 diabetic or pre-diabetic and you're trying to figure out how to get your glucose down, stop thinking about how to get the glucose down. Think about stop eating it, because it's crazy for you to sit there and continuously eat glucose and then worry how you're going to get your blood glucose down. Think of like a running bathtub, and you keep the tub running constantly, and you've got a little cup that you're sitting there and you're trying to dish the water out of the tub, but the tub is it's way overpowering. That's pushing way more water into the tub than you can scoop out with your little cup. That's what you're doing with glucose. You're constantly eating it, and then you're constantly worried, oh my gosh, how do I get this glucose down? So that's the first thing. Stop all sugar, high fructose corn syrup, really decrease the amount of fruit you eat. And as far as the carbohydrates, stick to the ones that grow above the ground if you just want to eat some kind of plants, but don't eat the vegetables below the ground if you're trying to get your glucose down, because that's going to be putting it back up. So the great first step, and this is why the answer to the question, yes, if all you do is stop eating sugar and stop eating flour, your weight will come down and you will start burning fat off your organs also. Because when you stop eating flour and you stop eating sugar, that means that you just stopped eating everything that man makes in a box, bottle, bag, and can, everything that's in the center aisles of a grocery store. When you stop eating sugar and flour, you've just stopped eating all of that, because it's all made with that. So that's the first thing, because when you stop eating that, that also means you stop eating all those chemicals, and you stopped eating all those seed oils, and both of those are toxic also. So just stopping that one thing is going to improve your health by so much. The other thing you can do, now that you stop buying these things from the grocery store, now what you can do is come to our Pantry Purge Party, and let's clear it out of your cabinets also. This is going to be the very, very best way for it to actually start getting healthy, lose weight, feel great. You have more energy. You think more clearly. You will be amazed at how your whole life turns around when you just keep that stuff out of your mouth. So stop eating flour and sugar. Come to our Pantry Purge Party. And you can do that by going to our website, drstevehewlett.com, and just click on the website. Or you can even click on the link below for the Pantry Purge Party. Come join us on a Saturday just for 2 hours from 11 to 1 Central Standard Time, and let's clean out your pantry together. So until next time, stay nourished and stay well.